let's talk about tiling and tiling textures and what that means. And the first example we're going to talk about is UV tiling. So specifically the unwraps the coordinates of the texture space of our objects and what that means for us. If that's a little bit over your head, hopefully this will clear it up. So I have some objects here. Let's just take a look at particularly one of them. Let's look at this backdrop object. And if we look at the actual asset, I'm just going to open this up. And if you don't have this asset pack, feel free to just use another asset inside of Unreal. Sphere or any default object should be fine. But if we open it up and then we go to the UVs tab and look at UV 0, one thing you're going to notice is that my UVs are outside this grayish box. So that means that my UVs are outside 0 to 1 space, which is fine. But this means that this area is not uniquely mapped. And then channel 1 is for the light map, which we're not currently using because we're using Lumen, but old habits die hard. So we have basically, this is where our UVs are. So these big planes are these big planes that you see here. And these little chunks are the little feet pieces. So I'm going to close this. And we're going to make a new example. I have already made a folder. So feel free, again, to just save wherever you want. I'm just doing this for my own organization. And I have material examples, tiling examples. And then I'm going to open up. I'm going to go to materials. I'm going to do m_UV tiling 01. So once we open this up, the first thing we're going to want to do is get some kind of texture or information. So I'm just going to type in brick. I'm going to type in texture sampler. Ahead of myself here. Texture sample. And this is going to allow us to sample a texture. And again, I'm going to come over here to the texture node because it's what we've selected. And let's type in brick and brick wall. Any texture will do. It doesn't matter what it is. You can put on whatever you think is interesting. And I'm going to plug this in. And the first thing we're going to notice if I put the cube on, the Unreal default cube, is that the UVs of this cube are perfectly matched to UV space. So 0, 0, 1, 1, all the way across. This is that UV space coordinate system. So right here, I have my texture. And if I go back to my asset right here, and I take my material, we'll go to my content drawer or close this. I'm running out of space. Save it. And I'm going to, in my scene here, you can see I have multiple mat IDs, just material slots based on polygons. And the one is the background. So I'm going to go to my content drawer, take this out, and I'm going to scroll down and apply this to that slot. And what you'll notice is that now we have a texture applied to that backdrop section. But the bricks are way too big. And if we look from the side or the back, again, it's still a problem all the way around. Now, one thing you'll notice is if I move this object, the brick pattern goes with it, and that's totally fine. So let's fix this tiling issue. So I'm going to double click to reopen the material. Again, I just clicked on it from the object side panel. We could always do it from the content drawer as well. Let's make this bigger. I'm going to make this a little smaller. And the first thing we're going to need to do is get a texture coordinate node. So texture coord or texture coordinate. And you'll notice this is the information about where these UVs are put in space. So you can see that there's an input here. In Unreal, under the hood, already where this says texture coordinate 0, index UV 0, this is already basically just implied that this texture sampler is using this data. For example, I could change this to text coord 1 because remember I said I had a light map channel, plug that into UVs, and you'll notice now my UVs look different because it's using the data from the other channel, right? If I come back into my mesh, the UVs we previewed here look like this, but the UVs in channel 1, so 0, 1, look like this. So now we've shifted them, okay? So I just want you to understand that basically this texture coordinate node is just looking at this data, which is just points in space inside this 0 to 1 space, okay? So let's put this back text coord to 0. Make this full screen. And when we hit apply, what we'll notice is nothing changed. And that is what we want because this is basically saying the exact same thing it was just saying. Now we have to think about what's coming out of this node. Well, actually what's coming out of this node are two values. If we look over here, we can actually see U tiling and V tiling if we click on the text chord. And this can be a really fast way. We could just come in here and type in, let's say 4 and V tiling 4. And right away in the preview, you'll notice my object texture is now tiling across 4 times. And if I come to my scene and I hit apply, same deal. My texture is now tiling across 4 times. And you might be asking me, well, what's that actually look like, or what's that actually doing? Well, it's stretching that space 4 times in the same number. So anytime it gets to 1, it goes to 2, it goes to 3, it goes to 4. UVs can't go above that. So this is one way we could affect the tiling. If we come back into our material and set these back to 1 and 1, another way we can do it is doing multiply. So if we have 2 values coming into here, we multiply those values by 1, we're right back to where our initial start was. But if I multiply by 4, you'll see we're now in the ability to where we were when we were multiplying U and V on this node. What's happening is when this node multiplies, UVs is looking for 2 numbers to come in, an X and a Y. So multiply here is taking the X value, multiplying by 4, the Y value, multiplying by 4, and then outputting X and Y scaled by 4. And so this can be a really handy way for us to adjust the UVs as well. So at a high level, this can be a way for you to adjust the UVs. Another way we can adjust the UVs tiling is if we do a scalar. So hold down 1 and then hold down 1 and left click. We'll get 2 1 scalars. So if I type in 1 and 1 here, okay. Then if you followed along in the math nodes, append vectors in our core nodes section. So right now we have 2 pieces of information coming out, X and Y. And in this append, because we're not adding, we're putting them together as 2 pieces of data that are being sent at the same time. Out of this, we're getting 2 pieces of data. These look like the same thing. So if I come in here and multiply this by this, so that in the UVs, you can see nothing happens. But the great thing is now I can come in here and set just one of these. So now we're tiling 4 times just vertically, 16 times just vertically, 1 time vertically. And here I can come in to set it 4 times horizontally, 6 times horizontally. And this gives us more control over how the tiling works. So if I apply this and I go back to my material, you'll see now this is the look we're getting. And again, if I want to change this and I don't want this to tile the way it was, let's go to 16. Let's go to 4. Yep, apply. I have control independent on the X and the Y. So hopefully this explains a little bit more about texture coordinates and tiling and what tiling really means. It's really the X and Y position saved into data for an object, and then we're multiplying that by some 2 numbers at the same time. Again, it's important that it stays as 2 numbers, and that allows us to morph / stretch or push in this UV space to allow for tiling. Hopefully that makes sense, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Let's take a look now at tiling things in world space. So previously we talked a little bit about UV tiling in UV space, which was taking the UV information from the texture coordinate, but sometimes we want to do things that aren't specific to the UVs of a mesh. So let's do another quick example. Right now we have this desk, and it also has, let's say, 3 materials on it, but let's go in the content drawer and make our world space tiling material. Feel free to save this where you want. I have a tiling examples folder here, and I'm just going to left click and make a material. So m_world tiling 01. And let's open this up and take a look and think about this. So we're going to first create a texture sample. And inside that texture sample, I'm going to, again, just apply my brick texture. Feel free to put any material in here you want or have. It doesn't matter. If it's tiling, this will make it look seamless. If not, there will be seams. So I'm going to plug this in the base color. And previously, we had used texture coordinates. Texture coordinates as the data to feed in where points should be in space. Well, we have other options of input data. So if I do world position, you can see it's also a red node. It's also input data, data that's being fed into this material. That's what that means. And we have a few options. Remember, that's what's coming out of the texture coordinate is where is the vertice or the pixel for every position in the UV map. Now what we're saying is where is the pixel or the UV in the world. So let's just plug this in and take a look. So first of all, this looks terrible. There's this like weird, like crazy animation looking effect kind of thing going on. So what we have to ask ourselves is like, well, what is going on here? So now you're saying that the XY position, so if we think about the world in Unreal over here, we have our X and Y little gizmo in the corner. That might be a little hard to see. But if we think about looking down on the world, okay, in X and Y, Unreal is centimeter-based measurement. So what's happening with this material preview is we're saying every centimeter, because that's the value to 0 to 1, because that's the default units Unreal, every centimeter repeat this texture, okay, in X and Y. So how do we get around this? Well, we can multiply. If we leave it at 1, it's still every centimeter. If we want it every meter, we need to convert up. So 0.01 in the X and Y. You'll notice in our preview, it looks stretched here. Why is that? Well, it's because if we rotate up, look at that. It doesn't have a UV coordinate going down. It only has it, again, if we think about the scene over here, we're looking straight down as if a camera's projecting. Again, red is X, Y is green here. You'll see. So if I apply this, and then I take this desk, because that'll be easy to show you on, and I apply our material to it, nothing crazy looks like it happens, right? Just looks like it has it. You'll notice the edge has this little imperfection where it looks like it's the pixel being stretched down because there is no data. There's one pixel of data and it just stretches the last possible polygon or last possible pixel. Now here's the crazy part. If I move this desk, notice what's happening. The texture is not moving with the desk. The desk is moving through the world space coordinates where the texture is being projected. And this can be handy for various reasons. Let's say I duplicated this desk and then I drag that desk out and I smush the desks together. Okay? Besides Z fighting, I'm going to move it up just slightly. You'll notice that this is seamless, this transition between the two desk surfaces. So this can be really handy for certain situations where I want objects to blend with each other because I want it to be based on the position in the world, not the object. If I set this back to UV tiling from a previous example, which you don't need, but just to demonstrate, these don't line up and the texture will move with the object. So at a high level, I just want to explain that world position data, if we think about it, if we come into our real scene and we project down on it, we really think about the XY coming out of here is like generating a camera looking at these coordinates. And because they're very tiny, we need to multiply by a decimal, which increases their scale. And again, we could even make this bigger, right? If I put 0.001 in here and apply, and I change my material back because we didn't, you can see now it's 10 times larger. Again, I move this around. And here's the fun part. If I ever take my desk now and scale it up, it's looking at the world space coordinates. It doesn't stretch or distort. I can make a world's biggest desk made of brick, right? So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a high-level example about how to set up world space tiling, and also how we affect it and how that affects the UVs of the texture sample when we are projecting it into the world from our material. Let's go over the basics of making things glow or emit light, sometimes referred to as emissive materials. So let's have fun here and let's make a big glowing ball. Let's make a very basic example. So I'm going to go to quickly add to project. I'm going to go to shapes and sphere. And once I click on sphere, it's going to add it to my scene. I'm going to drag it forward here. And we're just going to set it on the ground next to the desk scene here. So again, I'm in the Desk Studio P scene. And it doesn't really matter that we are, but just in case you want to follow along. And you can see with my sphere here, it has a default basic shape material. So let's make a material for this that glows. Let's go into our content drawer. And in material examples, I'm personally just going to make a folder called emissive materials. And I'm going to make a folder, or a file, I should say, called material. Let's call this m underscore basic emissive 01. And again, feel free to put the file wherever you see fit or wherever you have your folder set up. And let's open this up and take a look at what this means for us. So by default, we see we have what is called emissive color. So if I hold down the 3 key, make a constant 3 vector, plug this into emissive color, and let's set this to red, 100% red. Hit OK. And save this asset. And then I'm going to just move this window over so we can see both at the same time. I'm going to come back to my content browser, left click, drag and drop this on the material. And let's take a look at what we're doing here. So now we have our big glowing ball, but it doesn't really look like it's glowing too much. Now, one thing we can notice, so let's add another sphere, and I'm going to drag it next to it, just so we can have a comparison about the quality of the object and what has changed. What you can see by default, when we have just the color put in, and it's the max it can be, the highest value you can go in RGB is 1. So the highest we could do is 111 by default with just the color node. You can see it's removed the shadow, and that's about it. But it doesn't really feel like it's glowing. So how do we make it glow? Let's drag this over, and I'm going to hold down M on the keyboard. M as in mom. And I'm going to left click, and I'm going to add this multiply node. So we can drag into the multiply. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Out to emissive. And then we can multiply by, let's say, 15. Apply this. And now you see our sphere is emitting more light. So if I zoom in here and explain why, right? We took a value of 1 and multiplied by 15. So now this number is what they call high dynamic range. So it is now higher than 1. So it is 15 coming into here in just the red channel. And we can make this as bright or as dark as you want. So feel free to play with this, put 500 in here, right? It's going to be super bright. And what you're going to notice is that when we save it, it's now really glowing. So, and you can notice it's outputting a lot more light. I'll use that in quotes when I say that. So this is the easiest way to get set up with glowing objects. We can multiply by a value, we can get a color, and just put that out to your emissive color. So hopefully this helps you understand the very basics of setting up an emissive material. Now let's take a look at emissives and how we can control its position on a material. So as you can see here, I have this desk lamp, but let's just recreate this because it has a master material, and we don't want to necessarily get into that right now. But if you're inside the Desk Studio P scene, and let's browse to the object. I'm going to click this little folder icon underneath this. And let's go to desk lamp, and let's just drag a second desk lamp out. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to remove the material, or we're going to make a new material for it. So let's go to the content drawer, and I'm going to go into my material examples, emissive materials, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to make a new material. And again, you can make this material wherever you need. but I'm going to name mine M underscore, let's think, masked emissive 01. And let's left click and drag and apply this to our lamp right now. So by default, you can see our lamp is black. Let's go back in and open up our material. And with the lamp on our screen and our material editor open, I'm just going to position this so you guys can see a little better. I'm going to plug in just like a constant 3 vector. So I'm going to hold down the 3 key and left click to create a constant 3 vector. And let's just make this red. And I'm going to plug that in and hit apply. And so now our lamp should be a reddish orange color. Now, let's say that I want just the bulb to glow, because that would be kind of hard, right? Because if I come in here and let's say that I wanted the bulb to glow blue. Well, if I make our constant 3 vector and set it to blue, again, I just can copy and paste it. If I plug this into emissive color and apply, well, it made it purple because it's an orange object and it's emitting blue everywhere. And that's not necessarily what we want. We want to be able to control where the emission comes from. And we can do that through the use of a mask. And so in the project, we already have this set up actually. So if I come in here and I type in lamp at the highest level, we've already generated a bunch of different textures. And one of those textures you can find in the project is called Desk Lamp 01 Body Emissive Texture. And this texture is aligned to the UVs, the unwrap of this object. So if I left click and drag this into my material and drop it, you'll see I get a texture sampler with a white and black mask. So if let's just open it up. It's a mask just to the polygons, the UVs of the bulb. So what we can do with that is we can take this texture sampler and we can multiply. Hold down the M key, left click, and I'm going to drag this into multiply. And now the RGB doesn't really matter because they're all going to be the same data because it's black and white data. I'm going to drag this out to emissive color. And what you notice in the preview is now only a section of my object is now glowing. And because I am saying whatever color is in here, multiply, and again, any value, any number, any color, multiplied by 0 is always 0. And that's what's happening here. Because it's pure black, doesn't glow at all. And because it's pure white, glow 100% whatever value you got going on. So if I drag this to the side and hit apply, you can see now I have an orange lamp with a blue bulb. And again, kind of basic example stuff. Once we have this set up, I can also, I'm just going to full screen this, drag this over. We can now multiply, again, holding down the M key and left clicking, or right click, type in multiply. I'm going to put the output of this into A, the output of the second multiply into emissive color. And now if I set this value in B to say 500, again, I am in a high dynamic range. The value here is super high. It is not 0 to 1. I am now way past it. And Unreal is doing a bunch of post-effect work and rendering effect to make sure that this feels super bright. I'm going to save this / apply it. If we go back into our scene now, we can see it looks like this bulb is glowing super bright. And I can always come back here and say, actually, I want my light to look greenish, and apply. And this will change that out. So this is a secondary way we can use masks that we generate outside of Unreal. You could also technically generate this inside of Unreal. But for now, this is a way to generate and think about multiplying it by a mask and then multiplying it to get the intensity. So intensity, and this is how we control where our emissive color goes inside of our objects. Hopefully this makes sense and gives you a little bit more insight into setting up emissive materials inside of Unreal Engine.